There is a man sitting in the dark. It is somewhere around 528 BCE, though no one alive at the time is counting years that way. The place is a bend in the Naranja River, in what is now the Indian state of Bihar. The tree above him is a ficus religiosa, a fig tree with heart-shaped leaves that move even when there is no wind. He has been sitting since sundown. The insects have found him. The air is heavy and wet. He is 35 years old. He has been starving himself, on and off, for 6 years. His ribs are visible. His eyes are set deep. He recently ate a bowl of rice milk offered by a village woman named Sujata, and his 5 companions, the ascetics who had practiced with him for years, left him in disgust. They thought he had given up. He has not given up. He has given up on every method he has tried so far, which is different. And tonight, under this fig tree, beside this slow-moving river, something is about to happen, something that will reshape the entire trajectory of human thought for the next 25 centuries. But here is what nobody tells you about this moment. What he sees, what the texts call his awakening, is not what any religion has ever prepared you for. It is not a vision of God. It is not a tunnel of light. It is not cosmic bliss or union with the infinite. It is something much stranger and much more useful. We will get to what he saw, but not yet, because to understand what happened under that tree, you first need to understand the one teaching that most people skip, the one that scholars call the most important idea in all of Buddhism, and the one that most Buddhists, if they are honest, have never fully understood. It is called Paṭicca-samuppāda. Say it like Paṭicca-samuppāda. In English, we translate it as dependent origination. And if that phrase makes your eyes glaze over, you are not alone. For most people, dependent origination is the diagram on the monastery wall that nobody reads. It is the chapter in the Buddhism book that you skip to get to the meditation instructions. It is 12 links in a chain, written in Pali, with names like Sankara and Vijnana, and it looks like something designed to be memorized by monks, not understood by people with jobs and mortgages and a Tuesday afternoon that feels like it will never end. This is not a story about a complicated philosophy. This is not a lecture on 12 abstract links in a chain you will forget by tomorrow. This is not something you need a monastery or a meditation retreat or 10 years of practice to understand. This is the single most practical observation a human being has ever made about why you suffer and how to stop. The Buddha himself said it. In a teaching called the Mahanidana Sutta, he turned to his closest student, a man named Ananda, who had been by his side for 25 years, who had memorized every word the Buddha had ever spoken, and he said this: dependent origination is deep and appears deep. It is through not understanding, not penetrating this teaching, that this generation has become like a tangled ball of string, like a knotted mass of thread, and cannot pass beyond the lower realms. A tangled ball of string, that is the Buddha's image for what your life looks like when you don't understand this one teaching. Not a tragedy, not a punishment, a tangle, something that could be straightened if you could see how the threads connect. And his greatest student, the brilliant Sariputta, the one the Buddha called the marshal of the Dharma, put it even more simply. He said, whoever sees dependent origination sees the Dharma. Whoever sees the Dharma sees dependent origination. One teaching. That is it. See this, and you see everything the Buddha ever taught. Miss this, and you miss everything. So, what is it? Start with a quiet monk on a dusty road. His name is Assaji. He is one of the first 5 disciples, the original group who practiced with the Buddha in the early days. He is not famous. He is not the wisest or the most powerful or the most eloquent. By all accounts, he is simply a man who walks slowly, speaks carefully, and carries himself with the kind of stillness that makes strangers stop and look. One morning, in the city of Rajagaha, a wandering ascetic named Sariputta sees Assaji walking on his alms round, and something about the way this monk moves through the crowd, unhurried, untroubled, as if the noise of the marketplace is happening in a different room, makes Sariputta follow him. He waits until the monk has finished collecting his food. Then he approaches and asks one question: "Who is your teacher, and what does he teach?" Assaji hesitates. He says he is new to the path, that he cannot explain the teaching in detail. But then he offers a single sentence, one line, spoken on a road in northern India, that will change the course of Sariputta's life, and, through him, the course of Buddhist history. Of those things that arise from causes, the Tathagata has told the cause, and also their cessation. That is it, the entire teaching of the Buddha, compressed into one breath by a quiet monk who didn't think he was qualified to explain it. Things arise from causes? The Buddha has identified those causes, and he has shown how they cease. Sariputta stands there on the road, and, according to the texts, in that moment, the dust-free, stainless eye of the Dharma arises in him. He sees it. Not intellectually, he sees it. The way you see your own hand in front of your face. Everything that arises ceases. Everything that exists because of conditions. Remove the conditions, and the suffering stops. He goes to find his friend Moggallana. He tells him what he heard. Moggallana sees it too. They both leave their former teacher that same day and walk to the Buddha's camp, and they become the 2 greatest disciples in the history of the tradition, all because a quiet monk summarized dependent origination in one sentence on an alms round. Here's what most people miss about this story. Assaji did not explain the 4 Noble Truths. He did not describe the Eightfold Path. He did not mention meditation, or morality, or mindfulness, or any of the things you usually hear when someone explains Buddhism to you for the first time. He went straight to the core. Things arise from causes. See the causes, and you're free. That is dependent origination. Before the lists, before the diagrams, before the 12 links, it is the raw insight, the engine underneath everything. Now hold that thought, because the next story is about the smartest man in the room getting it wrong. 25 years after the Buddha began teaching, his closest companion, Ananda, is sitting with him in the Mahanadana Sutta. Ananda has been at the Buddha's side longer than anyone. He has heard every discourse, memorized every teaching, attended every gathering. He has a memory so precise that after the Buddha's death, he will be the one who recites the entire canon from recall at the first Buddhist council. And in this moment, Ananda says something casual, something confident. He says, "It is wonderful, venerable sir. It is marvelous." This dependent origination is deep and appears deep, but to me it seems as clear can be. The Buddha's response is immediate, not gentle, not encouraging. Do not say that. Ananda, do not say that. Pay attention to this. The Buddha does not often speak sharply. He is known for patience, for meeting people where they are, for the teaching method he called upaya, skillful means, adapting the message to the listener. But here, with the person who knows him best in the world, he does not soften the correction. This dependent origination is deep and appears deep. It is through not understanding, not penetrating this teaching, that this generation has become like a tangled ball of string. If Ananda, the man who memorized every word, can think he understands this teaching and be wrong, then so can you. So can anyone who has ever read a chart of the 12 links and thought, okay, I get it. Understanding dependent origination, intellectually, is not the same as seeing it. And the difference between those two things is the difference between reading a map of the ocean and nearly drowning. But there is a third story, and this one changes everything. In the Nagara Sutta, the Buddha describes his own discovery, and the image he uses is unlike anything else in the canon. He says that before his awakening, he was like a man walking through a dense jungle who stumbles upon the ruins of an ancient city, overgrown, forgotten, buried under centuries of vegetation. Walls still standing, gates intact, the remains of lotus ponds and parks and streets, all hidden beneath the forest. He did not build the city, he found it. And the city he found, the ancient structure hidden underneath the tangle of the forest, was the chain of dependent origination. It was always there, running underneath every moment of every life, generating suffering, generating attachment, generating the whole spinning wheel of samsara. No one had cleared the overgrowth enough to see it, until him. This image matters because it tells you something critical about the Dharma. The Buddha did not invent a philosophy. He did not create a system. He uncovered something that was already operating. In you, in me, in every person who has ever woken up at 3 in the morning with a feeling in their chest they cannot name. The chain is already running. It was running before you were born. It will keep running after you die, unless you see it. So what is this chain? What are its links? And why did the Buddha say that seeing it clearly is the same thing as seeing the entire Dharma? Before we walk through all 12 links, which we will, there is a simpler way to see the engine. 4 links. That is all you need to start. Ignorance. You don't see things as they are. You see them as you want them to be, or as you fear them to be, but not as they are. Craving, because you don't see clearly. You reach for pleasure, for security, for a version of yourself that feels permanent and solid and safe. Clinging. The reaching becomes gripping. You hold on to relationships, to identities, to beliefs, to the story of who you are. And the tighter you hold, the more it hurts. Suffering. Not because life is punishment, not because the universe is cruel, but because you are gripping something that is, by its nature, moving. You are holding water, and the water doesn't care that your hands are tired. That is the short chain. Ignorance, craving, clinging, suffering. And if you sit with it for even 60 seconds, if you think about the last time you felt that knot in your stomach, the last time you scrolled your phone at midnight looking for something you couldn't name, the last time you said something you regretted because you were afraid of losing something you thought you needed, you will find these 4 links. Every time. This is not abstract philosophy. This is Tuesday, so let's pause here. Because if you've stayed with me this far, you've already seen something that most introductions to Buddhism never show you. You've seen a quiet monk transmit the entire teaching in one sentence on a road. You've seen the Buddha's closest companion, a man with perfect memory, told that he hasn't understood. And you've seen the Buddha himself describe his discovery not as an invention but as an excavation, an ancient city buried under the jungle of your own mind. 3 encounters with the same teaching, 3 completely different people. And in every case, the teaching is the same. Things arise from conditions. See the conditions? And the tangle starts to loosen if this is making something click for you. If you're starting to feel why the Buddha said, this one teaching holds everything else together, subscribe to this channel. This is the kind of content that the algorithm buries, and your subscription is the only thing that tells it to keep showing this to people who need it. And while you're here, drop a comment and tell me, before this video, did you think dependent origination was the boring part of Buddhism? Because if you did, you are about to change your mind. Now, let's go deeper. The 12 links of dependent origination are not a list. They are a story. The story of how suffering builds itself inside you, moment by moment, life by life, breath by breath. And the only way to understand them is to stop treating them like a chart on a wall and start feeling them as a sequence that is happening in you right now. So here is the chain. Not as a textbook, as a life. The first link is avijja, ignorance, not stupidity, not a lack of information. The Pali word means something closer to not seeing. You are not seeing things as they are. You are seeing them through a fog, the fog of wanting, of fearing, of assuming that you are a solid, permanent self moving through a solid, permanent world. And because you don't see clearly, everything that follows is distorted. Like trying to find your way through a city with a map that's almost right, but not quite. Every turn takes you somewhere close to where you meant to go, but never exactly there. And after enough wrong turns, you are lost. And you don't even remember the moment you started drifting. From ignorance arise sankhara, sankayachra, volitional formations. These are the patterns, the grooves in your mind that have been worn so deep they feel like identity. The way you always react to criticism with defensiveness. The way you always reach for your phone when you feel lonely. The way you always tell yourself the same story about who you are and what you deserve. These are not choices you are making in the moment. They are momentum. They are the water running through channels that were carved years ago, maybe decades, and the water doesn't know it's following a groove. It thinks it's flowing freely. From formations arises vijnana, consciousness. Not awareness in the broad sense, something more specific, the arising of a knowing mind that is already conditioned, already shaped by the patterns beneath it. You don't wake up each morning with a fresh, neutral consciousness. You wake up with a consciousness that has been formed by everything that came before. Every habit, every fear, every story you've told yourself in the dark. And this conditioned consciousness is the lens through which you see the entire world. You think you are seeing reality. You are seeing your conditioning. And then name and form. The mind and body tangled together. And from that tangle, the 6 sense bases, eye, ears, nose, tongue, body, mind, the doors through which the world pours in, contact. The moment when a sense base meets an object, your eye meets a face, your ear meets a voice, your mind meets a memory, and from contact, from that bare meeting of sense and world, something arises that changes everything. Feeling, Vedana, not emotion, something more primitive than emotion. A bare tone, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. Before you even know what you are looking at, before the conscious mind has formed a thought, there is already a feeling tone, a pull toward, a push away, a dull blankness. This happens faster than thought. It is happening right now. As you listen to these words, your mind has already decided whether this moment is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, and you didn't choose. It just happened. And this is where the teaching turns, because feeling, by itself, is not suffering. A pleasant feeling arises, an unpleasant feeling arises. That is just weather. That is just the nervous system doing what nervous systems do. The suffering starts at the next link. Tanha, tanha, craving, thirst. The grab, the pleasant feeling arises, and the mind says more. The unpleasant feeling arises, and the mind says, make it stop. The neutral feeling arises, and the mind says, give me something else. This is the hinge of the entire chain. This is the link where you go from a human being having an experience to a human being trapped by an experience. And the Buddha said, in the second of the Four Noble Truths, that this craving is the origin of suffering, not the feeling, the craving that follows the feeling. You feel an ache of loneliness on a Sunday evening. That is feeling. You pick up your phone and scroll through the lives of people who seem less alone than you. That is craving. You spend 2 hours doing this and feel worse than when you started. That is the chain, operating exactly as mapped 2,500 years ago. From craving comes upadana, patana, clinging, grasping. The craving hardens into attachment. You don't just want, you need. You don't just prefer, you cannot let go. You cling to pleasure, you cling to opinions. You cling to identity, the story of who you are, what you deserve, what you've earned, what was taken from you. And the clinging becomes a kind of cage that you built yourself from the inside. You cannot see the bars because they look like me. From clinging, becoming, from becoming, birth, from birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, grief, despair. The whole mass of suffering, link by link. Not because someone cursed you, not because the universe is cruel, because a chain of conditions is running automatically, impersonally, without malice, and you have never stopped to look at it. Here's the part nobody tells you. The Buddha did not lay out these 12 links to depress you. He laid them out because every single link is a point of intervention. If you can see the craving before it hardens into clinging, you're free. If you can feel the feeling tone without adding the story of craving on top, you're free. If you can look at your own ignorance clearly enough to say, I am not seeing things as they are, even that is already the beginning of the end of the chain. This is not a prison sentence. This is a diagnostic map. And the Buddha handed it to you with both hands open. But it gets stranger, because 700 years after the Buddha died, a philosopher named Nagarjuna looked at this chain, looked at the fact that everything arises dependent on conditions, that nothing in the chain has independent, self-sustaining existence. And he drew the most radical conclusion in the history of Buddhist thought. He wrote, in the Mula-madhyamaka, his masterwork, the fundamental verses of the Middle Way, a single line that sent shockwaves through every Buddhist school in Asia. Whatever is dependently arisen, that is explained to be emptiness. Shunyata, emptiness. Not nothingness, not a void. The absence of inherent, fixed, independent existence. If everything arises dependent on conditions, then nothing, not a thought, not a feeling, not a self, not a suffering, exists the way you think it does. Nothing is solid. Nothing is permanent. Nothing is just the way things are in some fixed, unchangeable sense. Everything is the way things are right now. Given these conditions, change the conditions, and everything changes. Nagarjuna did not invent this. He simply followed the chain to its logical end. The Buddha planted the seed in the Nagara Sutta, the ancient city, buried under the jungle. Nagarjuna cleared the last of the overgrowth. And here is why this matters to you, sitting wherever you are, sitting right now. If your suffering is dependently arisen, if it exists because of specific, identifiable conditions, then it is not permanent. It is not who you are. It is not your fate, your karma in the popular misuse of the word, your punishment. It is a chain of conditions. And chains, once seen, can be broken. Not by force, not by willpower, not by gritting your teeth and trying harder, by seeing. Stay with me, because we are about to go back to that tree by the river. And this time, I'm going to tell you what he actually saw. Let's go back to the river. It is the third watch of the night, somewhere between 2 and 6 in the morning, the hours when the world is so quiet, you can hear your own blood. The man under the fig tree has been sitting for hours. His body is still, his breath is slow. And his mind, the mind that has tried every technique, every austerity, every method available in 5th century BCE India, has finally stopped reaching. This is what the texts describe. In the Udana, the earliest poetic collection in the Pali canon, the Buddha's awakening is recorded not as a vision or a revelation, but as a contemplation. He looks at his own experience, the raw, moment-by-moment unfolding of his own mind, and he sees it. The chain, not as a concept, not as a philosophy, as something happening right there, right then. In real time, he sees ignorance giving rise to formations, formations giving rise to conditioned consciousness, consciousness tangled with name and form, pouring through the 6 senses, making contact, producing feeling, and then, at the hinge, the craving, the grab, the thirst that turns a neutral moment into a prison. He sees the craving harden into clinging, the clinging generate becoming, the becoming generate birth, and from birth, the whole catastrophe. Aging, sickness, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, despair. He sees it running forward. This is how suffering arises, and then he sees it running backward. This is how suffering ceases. When ignorance fades, formations fade. When formations fade, conditioned consciousness fades. When consciousness is no longer driven by the old grooves, the entire chain loosens, link by link, like a knot untying itself in slow motion. Not by force, by the simple absence of the conditions that held it together. That is what he saw. Not God. Not light. Not a cosmic vision that required faith or devotion or belonging to anything. He saw a chain of conditions, impersonal, mechanical, running in every human mind. And he saw that the chain could be broken at any point where you stop feeding it. And in that moment, according to the Udana, he spoke not to anyone, because no one was there. He spoke to the darkness. He said, "When things become clear to the ardent, meditating one, all doubts vanish, for one understands each thing along with its cause." Each thing along with its cause. That is the whole of it. That is 25 centuries of Buddhist philosophy in 9 words. Now watch what happens next, because the story doesn't end under the tree. It follows the teaching out into the world, into the lives of people who encountered this chain and were either freed by it or crushed by it. Consider Moggallana, the Buddha's left hand, the disciple known for supernatural powers, psychic abilities, the capacity to travel between realms, the most formidable mental force in the entire Sangha. If any human being should have been exempt from the chain of conditions, it was Moggallana. He was beaten to death by hired assassins. A rival sect, threatened by the Buddha's growing influence, paid a group of bandits to find Moggallana and kill him. And they did. They found him in his dwelling, and they beat him until his bones were, as the texts say, crushed to the size of grains of rice. The other monks were devastated. How could this happen? How could the most powerful monk in the Sangha die like this, brutally, senselessly, at the hands of hired thugs? The Buddha's answer was dependent origination. In a previous life, he explained, Moggallana had, under the influence of his wife, attempted to kill his own aging parents. The karmic chain from that action, though separated by lifetimes, had not been broken. Conditions planted long ago bore fruit in the present, not as punishment, not as cosmic justice, as the impersonal unfolding of cause and effect. Even psychic powers cannot outrun the chain. Even the most advanced practitioner in the room is still subject to the conditions they have set in motion. This is where the teaching gets uncomfortable, because it means there is no shortcut. There is no spiritual bypass. There is no amount of meditation or devotion or special status that puts you above the chain. The only freedom is in seeing it clearly, completely, without flinching, and then choosing, in this moment, not to add another link. And this brings us to something remarkable, something the Buddha mapped in the 5th century BCE that neuroscientists accidentally confirmed 2,500 years later. In 2001, a researcher named Marcus Reichel at Washington University in St. Louis published a paper that changed the field of neuroscience. He had discovered something called the default mode network, a web of brain regions that activate when you are not focused on any external task, when you are just sitting, just waiting, just being. And what does the default mode network do? It thinks about you. It runs the me story. It replays conversations. It worries about the future. It rehearses what you should have said. It constructs and maintains the narrative of self, who I am, what I deserve, what might go wrong, what I need to do to be safe. Pay attention to this. The brain's deft setting, the thing it does when nothing else is happening, is self-referential rumination. I, me, mine. What about me? What will happen to me? It is the neurological correlate of the middle links of the chain. Consciousness conditioned by formations. Contact filtered through the sense of self. Feeling immediately hijacked by craving. The whole loop, running on automatic, burning energy, generating the low hum of dissatisfaction that you feel on a Tuesday afternoon, when nothing is wrong, but nothing feels right. The Buddha mapped this loop without a brain scanner. He mapped it by sitting under a tree and watching his own mind. Watching the way ignorance gives rise to formations. Formations give rise to conditioned consciousness. And conditioned consciousness spins the entire wheel of craving and clinging and suffering. He did not call it the default mode network. He called it samsara, the wheel that turns. And here is the finding that would not have surprised him. Meditation specifically, the kind of sustained, non-reactive awareness that the Buddha taught, is one of the only activities that turns down the volume on the default mode network, not by shutting it down, by letting you see it, by creating a gap between the feeling and the craving, by interrupting the chain at the exact hinge point the Buddha identified 25 centuries before anyone had heard of an fMRI. The Asuttava Sutta says it plainly. An untaught ordinary person might become disenchanted with this body, made of the four great elements, seen to be taken up and put down. But the mind, this the untaught person cannot become disenchanted with. And why? Because for a long time, this mind has been held by the untaught person as, this is mine, this is me, this is myself. The body ages visibly. You can see it in the mirror. But the chain of the mind is invisible. It runs beneath thought, beneath feeling, beneath the story you tell about yourself. And that is why the Buddha said, dependent origination is deep and appears deep. Not because it is intellectually complicated, because the place where the chain operates is the place you are least willing to look. Your own mind, your own I, the thing you have spent your entire life assuming is solid, permanent, and in control. The chain says otherwise. The chain says your I is a process arising moment by moment from conditions you did not choose and cannot fully control. And the moment you see that clearly, not as a concept, but as a living fact, felt in your own chest, something shifts. Not a dramatic shift, not a blinding light. Something quieter, like setting down a weight you forgot you were carrying, like unclenching a fist you didn't know was closed. That is what the Buddha felt under the tree. Not cosmic bliss, not union with the infinite. Relief. The deep, clean relief of finally seeing what was always there, and realizing that seeing it is enough. So where does this leave you? You have spent the last 30 minutes with a teaching that most people skip. The diagram on the monastery wall, the chapter in the book you were supposed to read, but didn't. And now you know why the Buddha said that whoever sees dependent origination sees the Dharma. Because this is not one teaching among many. This is the teaching. The engine underneath everything else, the Four Noble Truths, they are dependent origination applied to suffering. The Eightfold Path. It is the method for interrupting the chain at the link of craving. Karma. It is the chain operating across actions and consequences. Emptiness. It is what Nagarjuna saw when he followed the chain to its logical end. That nothing in the chain has independent, fixed existence. Compassion. It is what naturally arises when you see that every person you meet is caught in the same chain you are, not by choice, not by fault, but by conditions. One teaching, Everything else is commentary. Here are 3 things to take with you. First, dependent origination is not a philosophy you need to believe in. It is an observation you can verify. The next time you feel that knot in your stomach, the tightness that comes with anger, or jealousy, or the quiet ache of wanting something you cannot have, trace it backward. What am I clinging to? What craving is driving the clinging? What feeling triggered the craving? You will find the chain every single time, not because the Buddha was a prophet, because he was a diagnostician, and the diagnosis is accurate. Second, you do not need to memorize 12 Pali words. You need to see one thing, the hinge. The moment between feeling and craving, that gap, the half-second between something unpleasant happened and I need to fix it, fight it, flee from it, is the entire space of your freedom. Every contemplative tradition in history, from Stoicism to cognitive behavioral therapy, is trying to widen that gap. The Buddha simply found it first, and he told you exactly where to look. Third, and this is the one I want you to remember, when you forget the other 2, the Buddha did not find freedom because he escaped the chain. He did not transcend suffering by leaving the world behind. He found freedom because he saw the chain running, in his own mind, in real time, link by link, and in the seeing, something released. Not because he fought it, not because he willed it away, because a chain that is seen clearly loses its power, not all at once, not perfectly, but enough to set down the weight, enough to unclench the fist, enough to sit under a tree on an ordinary night and discover that the ancient city was always there, buried under the jungle of your own not seeing, and that finding it changes everything. Which link in the chain catches you the most? Is it craving? Clinging? Ignorance? The feeling tone that hijacks you before you even know what happened? I want to hear it. Tell me in the comments, because this teaching only works when it gets specific, when it moves from a chart on a wall to the knot in your chest, on your Tuesday afternoon, in your life. The Buddha sat under a tree and traced the chain. You don't need a tree. You don't need a monastery. You don't need to believe in anything. You need 5 minutes and the willingness to look